When the young adventure blogger set out to explore hidden channels in the Florida Everglades, her camera was rolling, but she never made it back to shore. 12 months of desperate searches turned up nothing, as if the swamp had swallowed her. Whole until a weathered crab fisherman pulled his trap from waters where the Everglades currents meet the open Gulf and found evidence that would point investigators toward a horrifying possibility. Earl Tompkins had been working these waters off Florida's Gulf Coast for 37 years, and his weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he hooked the buoy line. The morning sun blazed overhead, turning the ocean surface into a sheet of hammered gold. His diesel engine chugged steadily as the winch groaned to life, pulling up the blue crab trap from 40 feet below. Heavy one. Today, he muttered, squinting against the glare. Good weight usually meant a decent haul, and with crab prices up this season, every pound counted. The trap broke the surface in a cascade of seawater, and Earl could see the blue swimmers scuttling inside, their claws raised in futile defense. But something else caught his eye, a flash of pink among the browns and blues. He swung the trap over the sorting table and opened the door, crabs spilling out in a clicking mass. What the hell? Earl reached past the agitated crustaceans and pulled out a phone in a waterlogged pink case. Algae and barnacles had begun colonizing the surface, and dried kelp wrapped around one corner. The device was clearly an iPhone, though the screen was black and lifeless after who knew how long underwater. He turned it over in his calloused palm. A young woman's phone, by the look of it. These things turned up sometimes, tourists dropping them off boats, kids losing them at the beach. But this one had been down there a while, judging by the marine growth. The trap had been soaking for 2 weeks in open water, about 8 miles from shore. Earl set the phone aside and finished sorting his catch, but his mind kept returning to the device. Something about finding personal items always unsettled him. The ocean had a way of keeping secrets until it decided to give them up. He'd found plenty over the years: watches, sunglasses, fishing gear. Once, even a wedding ring, which he'd turned over to the Coast Guard. By the time he reached the dock at Goodland Marina, Earl had decided he'd run it over to the sheriff's office. Let them figure out what to do with it. Standing at the evidence counter an hour later, Earl handed over the barnacle-covered phone, thinking it was just another piece of ocean junk. He couldn't know that the waterlogged device would soon shatter. A year of silence. Grant Westfall was reviewing architectural plans in his home office when his phone rang. The caller ID showed the Collier County Sheriff's Office, and his hand hesitated over the device. Random calls from law enforcement never brought good news. Mr. Westfall, this is Detective Patricia Chun with the Collier County Sheriff's Office. Are you the father of Kira Westfall? The plans on his desk blurred. Grant's throat constricted. Yes, I'm her father. Has something happened? Mr. Westfall, we've recovered some property that may belong to your daughter. Would you be able to come to our offices this afternoon? Property? What kind of property? Grant was already standing, reaching for his keys. A cell phone was found by a commercial fisherman. The serial number matches the device registered. To your daughter. I understand she's been missing for approximately 1 year. Grant's legs nearly gave out. He gripped the edge of his desk. Yes, she disappeared in the Everglades. You found her phone where? I'd prefer to discuss the details in person, Mr. Westfall. Can you come in? I'm on my way. The 20-minute drive to the sheriff's office felt like hours. Grant's mind raced with possibilities, each more agonizing than the last. Kira's phone, after a year of nothing, no leads, no sightings, no digital footprint. Suddenly, her phone surfaces. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. Inside the sheriff's office, Detective Chun led him to a small conference room. On the table sat an evidence bag containing a pink phone case covered in marine growth. Grant recognized it immediately. He'd bought that case for Kira 2 Christmases ago. She'd laughed at the glittery pink design, but used it anyway because Dad picked it out. Is this your daughter's phone? Detective Chun asked gently. Grant nodded, unable to speak. Mr. Westfall. The phone was recovered from a crab trap approximately 8 miles offshore in about 40 feet of water. Our technical team was able to extract some data despite the water. Damage. There are videos on here from the day your daughter disappeared. She turned a laptop toward him. These are the last recordings. I should warn you, they may be difficult to watch. Grant saw his daughter's face fill the screen, alive and vibrant. She was in her kayak, blonde hair catching the late afternoon. Son, her voice bright with excitement as she narrated for her vlog. Hey adventure seekers, I'm out here in this incredible backcountry channel that some locals at the bait shop told me about. They said, this is where the big tarpon hide, completely untouched by tourist traffic. Can you believe this? Place? The timestamp read 4:47 p.m. Less than an hour before she was supposed to meet Jenna back at the launch. Grant watched his daughter paddle through the mangrove-lined waterway, her camera capturing the pristine wilderness. She was alone, just as Jenna had told the police. Her best friend had left early for a family dinner, but Kira wanted to get more footage for her YouTube channel. The GPS data shows this location, Detective Chun said, pointing to a map, indicating a remote area deep in the 10,000 islands. The phone's last recorded position before it went dark. Our Marine Patrol units say the currents from that area could potentially carry debris out to open water over time. Grant stared at the map coordinates, memorizing them. A year of searching, of hiring private investigators, of sleepless nights. And now this, his daughter's last known location, precise to within a few feet. What happens now? Grant asked, his voice hoarse. We'll be coordinating with Marine Patrol to search the area again. No, after this much time. Chun trailed off. We'll also be canvassing marinas and boat launches, seeing if anyone remembers anything from that day. Just then, a uniformed officer knocked and entered. Grant noticed the Marine Patrol insignia on his uniform. Detective. I couldn't help but overhear, Officer Troy Hutchins said. I patrol those waters regularly. If you're planning to canvass the marinas, I'd be happy to help. I know most of the charter captains and locals down there. Detective Chun nodded appreciatively. That would be helpful, Officer Hutchins. Mr. Westfall, would you like to be involved in the canvass? Sometimes a family member's presence helps jog people's memories. Grant stood immediately. Yes, absolutely. When do we start? Officer Hutchins checked his watch. I can take Mr. Westfall down to Chokoloskee Marina now if you'd like. That's the closest launch point to where his daughter was filming. Most boats heading to that backcountry area would launch from there. As Grant followed Officer Hutchins out of the building, he clutched a printout of the GPS coordinates. His daughter had been in that remote channel, excited about some secret fishing spot the locals had mentioned. Then nothing. Her phone somehow ended up in 40 feet of ocean water, 8 miles from shore. None of it made sense, but for the first time in a year, he had a lead, a place to start looking again. He would not waste it. Grant sat in Officer Hutchins' Marine Patrol vehicle as they drove south on Route 29 toward Chokoloskee. The mangroves pressed close to the narrow road, and the afternoon heat shimmered off the asphalt. He kept replaying Kira's final video in his mind, her excitement about the secret fishing spot, the way she'd smiled at the camera. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, Grant said, breaking the silence. Hutchins glanced over with what seemed like genuine sympathy. No problem at all. I have a daughter myself, about your girl's age. Can't imagine what you've been going through this past year. They pulled into Chokoloskee Marina, where weathered fishing boats bobbed alongside newer recreational vessels. The smell of diesel fuel and salt water filled the air. Grant noticed how several boat captains nodded respectfully at Officer Hutchins as they walked down the dock. Let me show you something, Hutchins said, pulling out his phone. He brought up a marine chart of the area. This is where your daughter's phone showed her last position, It's a tricky area. Lots of channels that look the same, easy to get turned around. The locals call it the maze. Grant studied the screen, comparing it to his printout. The detective said something about currents carrying the phone out to sea. It's possible, Hutchins said, though his tone suggested skepticism. But 8 miles is a long way. More likely the phone was moved by something else, maybe caught in a boat's prop wash or tangled in fishing gear. These commercial guys drag nets and lines all through these waters. They stopped to question several charter captains, but most claimed they hadn't been operating in that area a year ago. One mentioned the backcountry channels were mostly used by locals who knew the waters, not commercial operations. Grant felt his frustration building with each dead end. Then Hutchins stopped abruptly, shading his eyes against the sun. "Well, I'll be damned. Wade Corbin." A man in his early 50s looked up from where he was working on a boat's engine. Sun-weathered and lean, with faded tattoos covering his forearms, he wiped his hands on a rag as he approached. Grant noticed the boat's name painted on the stern. "Second Chance. Troy," Corbin said with an easy smile. "Didn't expect to see Marine Patrol down here on a Sunday." "I'm actually here on a different matter," Hutchins said, gesturing to Grant. "Wade, this is Grant Westfall. His daughter went missing in the backcountry about a year ago. Grant, Wade here is one of the most experienced captains working these waters. Been fishing the 10,000 Islands for what, 20 years? 23, Corbin corrected. He extended a grease-stained hand to Grant. "Sorry to hear about your daughter, sir. These waters can be unforgiving." Hutchins pulled out his phone again. "Wade, take a look at these coordinates. Ring any bells?" Corbin studied the screen, his brow furrowing. "That's way back in the maze, tricky spot. Good fishing if you can find it, but most folks don't venture that far back." He looked at Grant with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "Your daughter was a fisherman? A blogger," Grant said. "She ran a YouTube channel about Florida outdoor adventures. Someone at a bait shop told her about a spot where big tarpon hide." Corbin nodded knowingly. "Yeah, the old-timers. Sometimes share those secret spots with pretty girls, trying to impress them, you know." He paused, seeming to consider something. "You said her phone just turned up?" Grant explained about the crab fisherman's discovery. As he spoke, he noticed Corbin exchanging a quick glance with Hutchins, though he couldn't read the meaning. 8 miles offshore in a crab trap," Corbin repeated slowly. "That's something, you know. The currents back in those channels are strange. Spring tides especially. I've seen stuff get sucked out from the backcountry and end up in the Gulf. Found a kayak paddle once, 15 miles from where the owner lost it. Is that what you think happened?" Grant asked eagerly. "The phone got pulled out by currents?" Corbin shrugged. "It's the only thing that makes sense, unless—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Unless what?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." Corbin seemed to come to a decision. "Listen, Mr. Westfall, I feel for you. I really do. How about this? I'm not booked tomorrow morning. Why don't I take you out there? We can retrace those waters. Maybe search some areas the official crews might have missed." Grant's heart leaped. "You'd do that?" "Sure. I know those channels like the back of my hand. Maybe we'll spot something everyone else overlooked." Corbin glanced at Hutchins. "That is, if Marine Patrol doesn't have any objections." Hutchins actually smiled. "I think that's a great idea. Wade knows those waters better than our patrol boats. If anyone can help you understand what might have happened out there, it's him." They arranged to meet at 7 the next morning. Corbin wouldn't accept any payment, insisting it was the least he could do for a fellow father. As Grant walked back to Hutchins' vehicle, he felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Finally, someone who actually knew the area where Kira had vanished. "Good man, Wade," Hutchins said as they drove away. "He's helped us out a few times over the years. Knows things about these waters that aren't on any chart. He seems very knowledgeable, Grant agreed, watching the marina recede in the side mirror. Oh, he is. If your daughter ran into any trouble out there, Wade would know the likely scenarios, weather patterns, current flows, dangerous spots where someone could get into trouble. Hutchins paused at a stop sign. Fair warning, though. After a year, he might find things you're not prepared to see. Grant's jaw tightened. I need to know what happened to her. Whatever it is, Hutchins nodded slowly. I understand. Just prepare yourself. The Gulf doesn't usually give back what it takes. The fact that the phone surfaced at all is unusual. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Grant stared out at the endless sawgrass prairie, thinking about tomorrow's search with Captain Corbin. The man had seemed genuinely sympathetic, and his knowledge of the waters was obviously extensive. For the first time in months, Grant felt like he was making real progress. He thought about calling his ex-wife in Colorado, but decided against it. She'd moved on, remarried, tried to forget. The weekly therapy sessions had helped her find closure, she'd said. But Grant couldn't let go. Not without answers. As Hutchins dropped him back at his car at the sheriff's office, the officer handed him a business card. My personal cell's on there. If you need anything, or if Wade finds something tomorrow, call me directly. I'll make sure the right people know about it. Grant thanked him and headed home to prepare for tomorrow's search. He'd need water, sunscreen, maybe some sandwiches. His hands shook slightly as he packed, remembering how Kira used to tease him about over-preparing for their fishing trips. Dad, we're going out for 3 hours, not 3 days, she'd laugh. Watching him fill coolers with supplies. Tomorrow, he'd be on the same waters where she'd disappeared, with a captain who knew every channel and current. Maybe, finally, he'd find some trace of what had happened to his daughter in that remote maze of mangroves and dark water. Grant arrived at Chokolosky Marina at 6:45 a.m., the morning air thick with humidity. Wade Corbin was already on his boat, checking equipment. The second chance was a 28-foot center console built for serious offshore work, with twin outboards and a sturdy T-top. Morning, Mr. Westfall, Corbin called out. Beautiful day for a search, calm seas, good visibility. Grant climbed aboard, noting the professional setup, multiple rod holders, large fish boxes, and an impressive array of electronics. As he stowed his backpack, his foot caught on a deck plate that seemed loose. Looking down, he noticed several plates that appeared to be hatches of some kind. Watch your step there, Corbin said quickly. Got storage compartments all through the deck. Helps with weight distribution when you're loaded with fish. Grant nodded, but something about the compartments seemed off. They were larger than typical fish storage, and he counted at least 6 separate hatches. The boat also had an unusual amount of fuel capacity. He could see multiple fuel gauges on the console. That's a lot of fuel tanks, Grant commented as Corbin started the engines. Need it for the long runs, Corbin explained easily. Sometimes I'm out for 12, 14 hours. Can't risk running dry 20 miles from shore. He gestured to a cooler. Grab some water bottles for us. It's going to be hot out there. They idled out of the marina, passing early morning fishermen preparing their gear. Once clear of the no-wake zone, Corbin pushed the throttles forward, and the boat lifted onto plane. Grant held the printout with the GPS coordinates, watching their progress on Corbin's chart plotter. So tell me about your daughter, Corbin said over the engine noise. What kind of videos did she make? Grant found himself relaxing slightly as he talked about Kira's channel, her passion for showing hidden Florida spots, her growing subscriber count, her dreams of turning it into a full-time career. Corbin seemed genuinely interested, asking about her equipment and filming techniques. They ran south for 30 minutes, the mangrove islands growing denser. Grant watched the GPS, noting they were approaching the coordinates from Kira's phone. His pulse quickened as Corbin began to slow the boat. Okay, we're getting close to that area, Corbin said, studying his instruments. But I've got to tell you something, Mr. Westfall. This particular section, it's not somewhere we can go. Grant felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? See those markers? Corbin pointed to some distant poles. That whole area is restricted. Marine Patrol designated it as a manatee protection zone a few months back. No boat traffic allowed. They'll write you a hefty ticket if they catch you in there. But my daughter was in there. Her GPS showed. No, I know. Corbin's expression was sympathetic. But that was a year ago. Regulations change. Look, I can get us close. Work the edges. The currents would have pulled anything out of there anyway. Grant wanted to argue, but Corbin was already turning. The boat. They spent the next 2 hours searching the perimeter of what Corbin claimed was the restricted area. Grant used binoculars to scan the mangrove edges while Corbin pointed out current patterns and tidal flows. You see how the water moves here? Corbin indicated the swirling eddies. Anything that goes in the water back in those channels gets pulled out this way. That's probably how your daughter's phone ended up in the Gulf. Around noon, Corbin announced they needed fuel. There's a dock about 15 minutes from here. We can grab lunch too, if you want. The fuel dock was attached to a small marina Grant hadn't seen before. While Corbin topped off his tanks, Grant noticed he'd barely used a quarter of his fuel despite running for hours. Grant wandered into the small store for a cold drink. When he came back out, he saw Corbin at his truck, loading supplies onto the boat. Among the boxes of water bottles and ice, Grant distinctly saw packages of feminine hygiene products, several boxes of tampons and pads. Stocking up, Corbin said, noticing Grant's attention. I keep a comprehensive first aid kit on board. You'd be surprised what people need on charters. Women especially appreciate having those supplies available. Had a lady last month. Cut her leg bad on a hook. Those pads make excellent bandages in a pinch. It was a reasonable explanation, but something about it felt rehearsed. Grant helped load the supplies, his unease growing. Who bought that many feminine products for? A fishing boat? As Corbin went inside to pay for fuel, Grant struck up a conversation with a dock worker who was hosing down the pier. You know Captain Corbin well? Grant asked casually. The young man glanced around nervously. Wade? Yeah, he's here. Pretty regular. Seems like a good captain. Thinking about booking a charter with him. The worker's expression shifted slightly. He knows the water's real good. He lowered his voice. Just so you know, he's got friends, Marine Patrol guys. They look out for him, if you know what I mean. His boat never gets inspected, never gets stopped. Before Grant could ask more, Corbin emerged from the store. The dock worker quickly busied himself with his hose, avoiding eye contact. On the ride back to Chokolosky, Grant's mind churned. Hidden compartments that seemed too large for fish, excess fuel capacity, feminine hygiene products in bulk, friends. In Marine Patrol, who ensured his boat was never inspected. Each detail by itself could be explained away. But together, they painted a troubling picture. You're quiet, Corbin observed as they entered the marina. Just thinking about my daughter. Grant said, which was partially true. I understand. Listen, I wish we could have gotten into that restricted area, but I can't risk my captain's license. You understand, right? Of course, Grant lied as they tied up at the dock. Corbin helped Grant gather his belongings. I hope this gave you some closure. At least understanding how the currents work, how her phone could have traveled. Sometimes the not knowing is the worst part. Grant thanked him for the trip, his mind already racing ahead. That restricted area story felt wrong. He'd seen no signs, no markers indicating a manatee zone, and Corbin's reluctance to enter the exact coordinates where Kira had been filming seemed too convenient. Walking to his car, Grant made a decision. He'd rent a small boat tomorrow, maybe from a different marina. Tell them he was a tourist wanting to explore. He needed to see that GPS location for himself, restricted or not. His phone buzzed with a text from Officer Hutchins. How did the search go? Any luck? Grant hesitated before responding. No luck. Captain Corbin was very helpful, though. Thank you for the recommendation. He didn't mention his suspicions. Not yet, but as he drove home, Grant couldn't shake the feeling that Corbin's helpfulness was hiding something else entirely. The man knew those waters intimately, including, perhaps, the perfect places to make someone disappear. Grant barely slept that night, his mind replaying every detail from the boat trip. By 5 a.m., he'd made up his mind. He drove to Goodland Marina, far enough from Chokoloskee that he wouldn't run into Corbin or his associates. Morning. He greeted the rental desk clerk with forced casualness. I'm visiting from Ohio, hoping to do some sightseeing in the mangroves, maybe some fishing. The clerk, a retiree named Carl, barely looked up from his newspaper. Know how to handle a boat? Yes, sir. Had a bass boat back home for years. 20 minutes later, Grant was navigating a 17-foot skiff through the calm morning waters. He'd programmed the GPS coordinates into his phone, using it to guide him deeper into the maze of mangrove channels. The rental boat's small motor seemed loud in the pre-dawn quiet. As he wound through increasingly narrow passages, Grant understood why they called it the maze. Every turn looked identical, walls of twisted mangrove roots rising from dark water. Without GPS, he'd be hopelessly lost within minutes. The coordinates led him into a particularly remote channel, barely wide enough for two boats to pass. Grant cut the engine, letting momentum carry him forward. That's when he heard it, the low rumble of diesel engines somewhere ahead. He grabbed the mangrove root to stop his drift and listened. Definitely boats, more than one, their engines. Idling. Grant tied off to a branch and climbed carefully onto the mangrove roots, his boat shoes slipping on the wet bark. He picked his way through the tangle, following the sound. Through a gap in the foliage, he saw them, 3 boats rafted together in a small natural bay. One was Corbin's second chance, but there was also another vessel Grant hadn't seen before, a 25-foot Mako with a blue hull. The third boat made Grant's breath catch. A marine patrol vessel with official markings. Wade Corbin stood on the patrol boat's deck, talking with officers Hutchins and Navarro. Grant recognized Navarro from the Marine Patrol Station, a stocky man with a thick mustache. They were transferring supplies from the Mako to Corbin's boat-heavy boxes that took 2 men to lift. Grant pulled out his phone, switching it to silent before activating the camera. He zoomed in as much as possible, trying to capture faces and boat registration numbers. The men seemed relaxed, clearly familiar with this routine. Next shipment from Cuba should be Thursday night, Hutchins was saying, his voice carrying across the water. Same pickup point. Weather looks good, Corbin replied. How many this time? 12, maybe 15. Families mostly, kids included. Grant's hands shook as he recorded. Human trafficking. They were talking about smuggling people. Navarro spat into the water. Getting risky with all the federal heat lately. Homeland Security's been sniffing around the docks. That's why we pay you boys 30%, Corbin said with a cold smile. To keep them sniffing somewhere else. Speaking of heat, Navarro said, glancing at Hutchins. What about that other situation, from last year? Maybe it's time to clean house. No, Corbin's voice turned sharp. That's my call, not yours. Grant's hands trembled as he kept recording. What situation from last year? Around the time Kira disappeared. Your dick's going to get us all locked up, Hutchins muttered. Should have handled it properly from the start. The Gulf doesn't ask questions. We've been through this, Corbin said. Wrong move would have brought every federal agency down here. The current arrangement works. Does it? Her old man sniffing around, that phone turning up. Navarro spat into the water. He won't find anything. I showed him everything except what matters. He bought the restricted zone story. Corbin's tone carried a dark satisfaction. Some things are worth the risk. The facility's secure enough. Grant forced himself to keep recording despite the rage building in his chest. Kira had kept her for a year. The phone. In the crab trap, had that been an accident? Or had she somehow managed to get it into the water? We should move the next group through the facility Thursday night after pickup, Hutchins said. Route 41 should be clear by midnight. Agreed. I'll have the warehouse section ready, Corbin said. And I'll handle the other matter then too. Grant had heard enough. He began backing away carefully, but his foot slipped on. Wet moss. A branch cracked loudly under his weight. What was that? Navarro's hand moved to his sidearm. Probably a raccoon, Corbin said. But he was scanning the mangroves. Lots of wildlife back here. Grant froze, pressing himself against a thick trunk. His heart hammered so hard he was sure they could hear it. After an eternity, he heard engines starting. I'll check it out, Hutchins said. You too. Head out. Don't want to cluster here too long. Grant waited until the engine sounds faded in different directions before creeping back to his boat. His hands shook as he untied the line. The abandoned processing plant off Route 41, Thursday. Night. His daughter was there, had been there all along. He started the engine and turned back toward Goodland, forcing himself to maintain normal speed. His mind raced with the implications. That other situation from last year, they were hiding. Something connected to the time Kira disappeared. The facility on Route 41, Thursday night. Whatever they were protecting, Corbin seemed personally invested in it. The way he said, "Some things are worth the risk," made Grant's skin crawl. The trafficking operation explained everything. The hidden compartments, the extra fuel for long runs to Cuba, the Marine Patrol protection. But there was something else. Something from last year that Corbin refused to clean up despite his partner's concerns. Something at that facility that was important enough to risk their entire operation. Grant checked his phone. The video was there, shaky but clear enough faces, voices, boat numbers, evidence of human trafficking, but also hints of something more, something connected to when Kira vanished. As he entered Goodland Marina, Grant made a decision. He had family in Miami. His brother-in-law, Blake, was a DEA agent, federal authority, outside the local network. It would take time to mobilize federal resources, but at least Blake could be trusted. But Thursday was only 3 days away. If they were planning to handle the other matter, then, if they were going to clean up whatever loose end they'd left from last year, he might lose any chance of finding out what really happened to Kira. Grant tied up the rental boat, his mind already planning. He knew where the old fish processing plants were along Route 41 abandoned, complexes from when the commercial fishing industry was bigger. He'd scout them carefully, find which one they were using, find out what they were hiding from last year. The smart move was to wait for Blake and federal backup. But smart wasn't what got results. Smart was what had left him with no answers for a year while he'd trusted the authorities and followed proper channels. Grant wouldn't make that mistake again. Grant spent the afternoon researching Route 41 using satellite imagery and old business directories. The Tamiami Trail had several abandoned fish processing facilities from the 1970s and 80s when commercial fishing was booming. Most were demolished, but 3 structures remained standing east of Collier Seminole State Park. He drove out as evening approached, taking note of each location. The first 2 were visible from the road-collapsed roofs and graffiti-covered walls made them unlikely hideouts. But the third sat a quarter-mile back from the highway, accessed by an overgrown service road. A rusted chain blocked the entrance. A faded "No Trespassing" sign hanging from it. Grant parked at a roadside picnic area and hiked through the sawgrass, approaching the facility from the back. The building was larger than he'd expected, a main processing floor with attached Warehouse space and several smaller outbuildings. Unlike the others, this one showed signs of maintenance. The roof was intact, and he spotted newer locks on the doors. Circling the perimeter, Grant stayed in the tree line. Through a gap in the boarded windows, he glimpsed light inside, just a faint glow, but definitely artificial. His pulse quickened. This had to be it. He found a vantage point behind a cluster of palmetto bushes and settled in to observe. As darkness fell, the facility remained quiet. No vehicles, no movement. But that interior light never wavered. Someone was maintaining this place. Grant was photographing the building when his phone vibrated. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered, "Hello." Silence for a moment, then heavy breathing. A whispered voice, hoarse and desperate. "Daddy." His heart stopped. Kira, is that you? They said you were looking." Her voice broke off in a sob. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to." The line went dead. Grant's hands shook as he tried to call back. The number was already disconnected. He stared at the processing plant with new urgency. She was in there. His daughter was right there, close enough that she somehow had access to a phone. He started toward the building but stopped himself. Charging in alone would be suicide. He didn't know how many people were inside, didn't know the layout. And that call, had Kira stolen a phone, or had they let her call? Was it a trap? Grant retreated to his car and immediately called Blake in Miami. "Grant, it's almost midnight. What's wrong?" "I found her. Kira's alive. They've had her this whole time." The words tumbled out as Grant explained everything. Boat discovery, the trafficking operation, the phone call. Jesus Christ. Blake breathed. "Grant, listen to me. Do not go in there alone. I can have a tactical team there by morning. Thursday night, they're moving her. That's tomorrow. If they relocate her, I understand. But if you go in there and get yourself killed, you can't help her. Send me everything you have, the video, the coordinates, all of it. I'll call in every favor I have. We'll get a team mobilized." Grant agreed reluctantly and spent the next hour uploading evidence to Blake's secure email. As he drove home, constantly checking his mirrors for surveillance, his phone rang. Again. This time, it was a number he recognized: Officer Hutchins. "Mr. Westfall, sorry to call so late. I wanted to check how you're doing after the search with Captain Corbin." Grant gripped the wheel tighter. "I'm fine, just processing everything." Good. Listen, someone reported seeing you out by the old highway tonight. Said you were taking pictures of abandoned buildings. That true?" Ice ran through Grant's veins. They knew. I couldn't sleep. Thought a drive might help. Those old buildings are interesting. I'm an architect." "Ah, that makes sense." Hutchins' tone was friendly, but Grant heard the edge beneath it. "Just be careful out there. Lots of dangerous areas off the beaten path. Homeless camps, drug activity. Wouldn't want you getting hurt poking around where you shouldn't. I appreciate the concern. Also, about that restricted area Captain Corbin mentioned, the one near where your daughter went missing. Turns out we're lifting those restrictions tomorrow for maintenance work. If you wanted to take another look with someone who knows the waters, I'd be happy to escort you. Maybe noon." Grant's mind raced. An invitation or a trap? That's very generous. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. "Sure thing. But Mr. Westfall, this might be your only chance to see that exact spot. After tomorrow, who knows when the area will be accessible again." The threat was barely veiled. "Come with us tomorrow, or lose your chance forever." Grant managed to keep his voice steady. "I understand. I'll let you know first thing in the morning." "You do that. Have a good night, Mr. Westfall. And remember, these waters are dangerous. People disappear out here all the time. Even experienced locals sometimes vanish." The line went dead. Grant's hands trembled as he pulled into his driveway. They knew. He was getting close. The phone call from Kira might have been their way of confirming his emotional investment, making sure he'd act predictably. He entered his house cautiously, checking each room. Nothing disturbed, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At his computer, he saw Blake had responded. Team assembling. ETA 0800. Do not engage before we arrive. That's an order. 8 in the morning. But Hutchins wanted him at noon, and they were moving operations Thursday night. The timeline was tightening like a noose. Grant paced his living room, Kira's voice echoing in his mind. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What did she have to be sorry for? What had they made her do? He looked at the clock. 2 a.m. 6 hours until Blake's team arrived. He could wait. Should wait. It was the smart play. But then he thought about Kira in that facility, knowing her father was looking for her. Would they punish her for that phone call? Would Corbin visit her tonight, angry about the increased scrutiny? Grant went to his closet and pulled out his old hunting knife, the one his father had given him decades ago. He'd never been a violent man, never been in a real fight. But for Kira, he'd become whatever he needed to be. 6 hours. He'd give Blake 6 hours. But if something happened before then, if he saw them moving her, if he heard her scream, all bets were off. He sat by the window, watching the street, the knife heavy in his lap. Somewhere out there, men were making plans to move his daughter, to make her disappear forever. Not if he could help it. Not again. Grant watched the clock crawl towards 6 a.m., every minute an eternity. Blake had texted updates throughout the night. Team assembled, equipment loaded, en route from Miami. Just 2 more hours. Then his phone buzzed, a multimedia message from an unknown number. The image that loaded made his blood freeze. Kira, photographed in what looked like a concrete room. Her face was gaunt, hair matted, bruises visible on her arms. Fresh bruises. Someone's hand gripped her shoulder, forcing her to look at the camera. Her eyes were wide with terror. The accompanying text read, "Every hour you delay costs her. Come alone now, or we relocate." Grant was in his car before rational thought could stop him. 2 hours was too long. They were hurting her because of his investigation. Every second he waited meant more pain for his daughter. He drove toward the processing plant, calling Blake's number straight to voicemail. Grant left a frantic message with the location, then tossed the phone aside. He couldn't wait. The service road to the facility was unguarded. Grant parked behind a stand of Brazilian pepper trees and approached on foot. Dawn was breaking, casting long shadows across the crumbling parking lot. No vehicles visible, but fresh tire tracks marked the dirt. He circled to a loading dock where a metal door stood slightly ajar. His heart hammered as he slipped inside. The air reeked of mold and something worse, human waste and fear. The main processing floor was a vast cave of rusted machinery and concrete. Makeshift partitions had been erected, creating smaller spaces. Grant heard voices somewhere deeper in the building and moved toward them, knife in hand. Through a doorway, he glimpsed the warehouse section. Mattresses lined the floors. Chains and shackles were bolted to support pillars. This wasn't just a way station, it was a holding facility. How many people had they kept here? A sound made him turn, soft crying from behind a steel door marked cooler storage. Grant tried the handle locked, but the crying grew louder. "Kira," he whispered. The crying stopped, then barely audible. "Daddy." Grant's hands shook as he examined the lock. A heavy padlock, too strong for his knife. He looked around, frantically for something to break it with. Well, right on schedule. Grant spun to find Wade Corbin standing 10 feet away, a pistol casual in his hand. The captain looked freshly showered and calm, like this was just another morning at the office. "Had a bet with Troy about whether you'd wait for backup or come charging in. I won." Corbin smiled coldly. "Fathers are so predictable." "Let her go," Grant said, gripping his knife tighter. "The FBI knows everything. They're on their way." Are they? Then I guess we better hurry. Corbin gestured with the gun. Drop the knife. Kick it over here. Grant hesitated, then complied. The blade skittered across the concrete. Kira's phone turning up was unfortunate, Corbin continued conversationally. She managed to hide it for 3 days after we grabbed her. Sneaky little thing. Thought she dropped it in the water during our initial disagreement. Imagine my surprise when Earl found it in his trap. You monster. She's just a young woman. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Pointed that camera right at us during a transfer. $50,000 worth of cargo she nearly cost me. Corbin's expression darkened. But I'll admit, keeping her was personal. Your daughter's got spirit. Fights every time. Grant lunged forward, but Corbin raised the pistol. Ah, you want to see her again? Stay put. Footsteps echoed as Hutchins and Navarro entered from another doorway. Both were in uniform, service weapons drawn. Took your time, Corbin. Sighed. Had to make sure he came alone, Hutchins replied. He looked at Grant with something almost like pity. You should have taken my noon offer. Would have been cleaner. Enough talking, Navarro said. We need to move them both. Boats ready at the auxiliary dock. Them both? Grant's stomach dropped. Can't leave witnesses, Corbin said. Don't worry, you'll be with your daughter. Brief reunion before the Gulf claims you both. Tragic boating accident. Father desperate to find missing daughter takes risks. Drowns in storm. There's no storm, Grant said desperately. There will be by tonight. Tropical depression. Forming. Perfect cover. Hutchins produced zip ties. Hands behind your back. Don't make this harder. Grant had no choice. As Hutchins secured his wrists, Navarro unlocked the cooler door. The smell that wafted out made Grant gag human waste. Infection. Despair. Bring her out, Corbin ordered. Navarro disappeared inside, returning with a figure that barely looked human. Grant almost didn't recognize his daughter. Kira had lost maybe 40 pounds. Her clothes were filthy rags. Infected wounds covered her arms and legs. She could barely stand, leaning heavily on Navarro. But her eyes, when she saw Grant, filled with a mixture of hope and anguish. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered. I tried to be careful. I didn't mean for them to see me filming. It's not your fault, baby. None of this is your fault. Touching, Corbin said. Move them to the boat. We'll take them out past the shelf. Weight them properly this time. They were marched through the warehouse section. Grant counted at least 20 mattresses, some with personal items still scattered around them, a child's doll, women's clothing. These men had destroyed so many lives. How many? Grant asked. How many people have you trafficked through here? Does it matter? Hutchins said. Supply and demand. People pay 30 grand to get here from Cuba. We provide. The service usually goes smooth. Until bloggers stick their noses where they don't belong. Navarro added. They reached a hidden dock where a go-fast boat waited, built for speed and stealth. As they forced Grant aboard, he spotted something that gave him hope. His phone, forgotten in his pocket, was still recording the video Blake needed. But hope died as Hutchins noticed the bulge. Check his pockets. Navarro found the phone and held it up. He was recording. Jesus, Wade, he could have transmitted, Navarro said. Relax, Corbin said, taking the device. No. Signal out here. We'll dispose of it with them. They shoved Grant into the boat's small cabin where Kira was already huddled. She immediately pressed against him, shaking. I'm here, Grant whispered. I'm here now. Through the cabin window, he watched Corbin start the engines. Hutchins and Navarro cast off lines. In minutes, they'd be in open water. No witnesses, no evidence, just another tragedy in the Gulf. Grant tested his zip ties, but they were police-grade, impossible to break. Beside him, Kira's breathing was labored, rattling in her chest. A year of captivity had broken her body, but as she looked at him, he saw the fighter still there. "Dad," she whispered. "The other girls, there are others." "I know. Baby, I know." The boat lurched as Corbin gunned the engines. They were leaving. Grant's last hope, Blake's team, was still at least an hour away. By then, he and Kira would be ocean floor residents, weighted down in the depths, were not. Even the crabs would find them. The go-fast boat sliced through the morning chop as they headed toward open water. Grant could feel the depth changing beneath them, the continental shelf dropping away into the deep gulf. Through the cabin's salt-hazed window, he watched Corbin at the helm, Hutchins beside him, studying a GPS. Another 10 minutes to the drop zone. Hutchins called over the engine noise. Navarro appeared in the cabin doorway, checking on his prisoners. Grant noticed the officer's holster was unsnapped, hand resting on his service weapon. These men had done this before. They knew the routine. Beside him, Kira's breathing grew more labored. She leaned against his shoulder, and he could feel the fever radiating from her skin. Whatever infections she'd developed in that hellhole. "We're winning. Stay with me, baby," Grant whispered. "I tried to escape," she said weakly. "So many times, but they always caught me. The chains, the room." She shuddered. "Wade came every few days. Sighed I was his reward for the risks he took." Grant's rage burned white-hot, but he forced it down. Anger wouldn't save them. He needed to think. The boat began to slow. Through the window, Grant saw nothing but empty ocean in every direction. Perfect place for bodies to disappear. "All right, bring them up," Corbin commanded. Navarro hauled Grant to his feet, then grabbed Kira roughly. She cried out in pain, and Grant instinctively moved to protect her despite his bound hands. "Leave her alone. She can barely stand." Navarro backhanded him casually. "Shut up." They were forced onto the deck where Corbin had already prepared. 2 lengths of heavy chain. Hutchins was attaching concrete blocks to the ends, the kind used for mooring markers. Professional, efficient. "Any last words?" Corbin asked mockingly. "Want to tell each other you love each other? Make peace with God?" Grant looked at his daughter, memorizing her face. Even broken and brutalized, she was still his little girl. "I love you, Kira. I never stopped looking. Never." "I know, Daddy. I love." The sound of rotor blades cut through the morning air. Everyone looked up to see a helicopter approaching fast and low. Not Coast Guard orange, Federal black. Federal. "Agents, stop your vessel immediately." The amplified voice boomed from the aircraft. Corbin slammed the throttles forward. The boat lurched violently, sending Grant and Kira tumbling across the deck. Navarro drew his weapon, aiming at the helicopter. "Are you insane?" Hutchins shouted. "That's Federal." "We're already fucked," Corbin screamed back. 3 cops moving refugees were looking at life. The helicopter banked sharply as Navarro fired. Grant saw his chance. With his hands bound behind him, he launched himself at Navarro's legs. They went down hard, the gun skittering across the deck. "Dad!" Kira's scream pierced through everything. Grant rolled to see Corbin dragging her toward the stern, one arm around her throat. He had the concrete block in his other hand. "Back off or she goes overboard." Corbin shouted at the helicopter. "More." Boats appeared on the horizon, Federal response vessels converging from multiple directions. The trap Blake had promised was closing. Hutchins made a calculation and dropped his weapon, hands raised. "I surrender." "I'll testify." "You fucking coward." Navarro struggled to his feet, diving for his gun. Grant kicked desperately, catching Navarro in the ribs. The corrupt cop stumbled, but kept moving. Just as his fingers touched the weapon, a sniper's bullet from the helicopter caught him center mass. He crumpled instantly. "Stop the boat." The amplified voice commanded. "You are surrounded." Corbin looked wildly between the approaching vessels and Kira in his grip. Grant saw the decision in his eyes, If he was going down, he'd take her with him. No, Grant lurched to his feet. Corbin shoved Kira toward the stern rail. The concrete block went over first, its chain unspooling rapidly. In seconds, it would pull her under. Grant didn't think. He just moved. Hands still. Bound, he slammed into Corbin with every ounce of desperate strength. They hit the deck hard, rolling toward the edge. The chain was almost taut. Grant saw Kira trying to resist, but she was too weak. The weight would drag her over in seconds. Blake Torres fast roped from the helicopter onto the deck, tactical gear, and rifle ready. His shot was precise. Corbin's shoulder exploded in red. The captain's scream was cut short as Blake's boot connected with his jaw. Another agent dove for Kira, grabbing her just as the chain went tight. He produced bolt cutters, severing the links in one smooth motion. Clear. Suspects down. We need medical immediately. Grant felt hands cutting his zip ties. He crawled to Kira, gathering her in his arms as federal agents swarmed the boat. She was conscious but fading, her body finally giving in to a year of abuse. Medical. 60 seconds out, someone reported. Blake knelt beside them, his professional mask slipping to show the uncle beneath. Jesus, Grant. Kira, we've got you, sweetheart. You're safe now. The facility, Grant said urgently. There are others, women and children. Already raided, Blake assured him. Your video gave us everything. 12 refugees rescued, all alive. The whole network's coming down. A medical helicopter thundered overhead, preparing to lower a basket. Grant held Kira tighter, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, weak but steady. Alive. Daddy. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, baby. I'm here. The nightmares, they said no one was looking anymore. I never stopped. Not for one day. Hutchins sat in federal custody, already spilling everything he knew. Corbin writhed on the deck as medics worked on his shoulder. His reign of terror finally ended. The man who'd kept Grant's daughter as a personal toy would never touch her again. As the medical team prepared Kira for transport, she gripped Grant's hand with surprising strength. Don't leave me, she pleaded, reverting to the little girl who used to be afraid of the dark. Never again, Grant promised. Where you go, I go. The rescue basket lifted them together toward the medical helicopter. Below, the go-fast boat swarmed with federal agents. Evidence teams were already documenting everything. In the distance, more helicopters converged. On the shoreline, the processing plant, the marina, every location from Grant's desperate investigation was being raided simultaneously. Blake had mobilized an army. As they rose into the morning sky, Grant looked down at the boat where he'd almost lost everything. The chains and concrete blocks meant for him and Kira lay abandoned on the deck, monuments to what nearly was. But they'd survived. Against all odds, through a year of hell, his daughter had held on long enough for him to find her. The nightmare was over. The healing could finally begin. The fluorescent lights of Naples Community Hospital's ICU cast harsh shadows across Kira's face. Grant hadn't left her bedside in 18 hours, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. IVS delivered antibiotics for the multiple infections ravaging her body. Malnutrition had stolen 43 pounds from her frame. The psychological evaluation would come later, but the physical damage alone was staggering. Blake Torres entered quietly, his D badge clipped to his belt. She's stable for now. Grant didn't look away from his daughter. The doctors say it'll be a long recovery. Months, maybe years. She's strong like her old man. Blake pulled up a chair. Corbin's talking. Full confession from his hospital bed. Turns out he's more afraid of Cuban cartel retaliation than federal prison. Tell me. The operation was moving 15 to 20 refugees per trip at 30,000 a head. That's 450,000 gross, split between Corbin, the two cops, and their Cuban partners. Been running for 3 years, Grant's jaw tightened. And Kira? Wrong place, wrong time. She paddled into that channel just as they were transferring a boat full of refugees. Had her camera pointed right at them. Corbin saw the red recording light. He rammed her kayak, knocked her into the water. During the struggle, her phone fell out of her pocket, but she managed to grab it before he subdued her, hid it in her clothing. The phone that ended up in the ocean. Blake nodded. She kept it hidden for 3 days, but the battery was already nearly dead from filming all day. It died within hours of her capture. No chance to call for help. She kept the dead phone hidden anyway, hoping somehow it could still help. On the 3rd day, when they were moving her to a more secure room, she knew it was now or never. Managed to throw it into a drainage canal behind the facility during the transfer, probably hoping someone would eventually find it, trace the GPS data from her last videos. The canal connected to a tidal creek phone got swept out to sea over the months. Grant finally looked at his brother-in-law. Pure chance that Fisherman found it. 1 in a million, but it was enough. Blake's expression darkened. Corbin admitted he kept her for personal reasons. Said killing her would bring too much federal heat, but that was just his excuse. The sick bastard had been assaulting her regularly. Hutchins and Navarro knew but looked the other way because Corbin was the Cuban connection. A soft sound from the bed made both men turn. Kira's eyes were open, unfocused from the pain medication, but aware. "Dad," Grant took her hand. Gently. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe. You're in the hospital. The others, the women and children." Kira's voice was weak. "All rescued," Blake assured her. "Every single one. They're safe now." Tears leaked from Kira's eyes. "I tried to help them. Shared my food sometimes, but I couldn't." "You survived," Grant said firmly. "That's what matters. You survived long enough for me to find you." Blake's phone buzzed. He checked it and stood. "Federal prosecutors are here. Corbin and Hutchins are both pleading guilty in exchange for testimony about the Cuban connections. They're looking at 25 to life. Would have been death penalty. If Navarro had survived." He squeezed Grant's shoulder. "I'll handle the legal stuff. You focus on her." After Blake left, Grant studied his daughter's hollow face. The vibrant adventure blogger was gone, replaced by a survivor of unimaginable trauma. But she was alive. Everything else could be rebuilt. "I'm sorry I took so long," he whispered. Kira's fingers tightened weakly around his. "You found me. That's all that matters. I'm never leaving you again. Whatever you need, however long it takes, we'll get through this together." She managed the ghost of a smile, the first he'd seen. Together. Grant settled. Back in his chair, their hands still linked. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Gulf, painting the sky in shades of redemption. Somewhere out there, federal agents were still processing evidence, building cases, ensuring justice. But in this room, a father and daughter began the long journey home.